A powerful Korean mafia boss decided to mock a young black waitress in his native language, fully expecting to break her. Instead, his entire face turned completely pale at her reply. Kim Woo-bin glanced at the name tag pinned to her uniform, took in her smooth complexion, and let out a cold smirk. To the ruthless leader of the city's most polished criminal syndicate, Millicent Brooks was nothing more than an easy target for a cruel game. This elite, high-end establishment was Woo Bin's unofficial territory, a place where he and his top lieutenants sat in tailored suits, flaunting their absolute dominance over everyone in the room. Tonight, he decided this waitress would be his personal entertainment. What he didn't realize was that Millicent Brooks wasn't just another server keeping her head down. He had no clue that his arrogant attempt to humiliate her would not only shatter his own untouchable facade, but would hand her the keys to dismantling his entire empire. This is the high-stakes story of what happens when dangerous arrogance crosses the absolute wrong woman. If you love seeing deceptive underdogs turn the tables and deliver the ultimate psychological defeat, smash that like button and subscribe right now so you never miss a brilliant comeback. The air inside the elite establishment hummed with the quiet rustle of multi-million-dollar deals and expensive cologne. It was a world built on old wealth, where status was measured in the subtle nods of powerful men. Moving seamlessly through the ambient lighting was Millicent Brooks. With her dark curly hair gathered into a flawless, elegant bun and her posture perfectly upright, she was the definition of practiced grace. Her white button-up shirt was crisply pressed, her necktie straight, and her apron tied with absolute precision. To the untrained eye, she was just a flawless waitress, invisible until needed, anticipating every demand before it was even voiced. But beneath that calm, composed expression and refined features lay an intelligence that ran far deeper than a dinner menu. Millicent had mastered the delicate art of surviving under the radar, letting the elite look right through her while she observed everything. She smiled politely through the subtle arrogance of the wealthy, keeping her head down and her secrets locked away. She was a ghost in a world of high status, masking her brilliant mind behind a server's polite compliance. Tonight, the dining room was packed, the tension was palpable, and Millicent moved with a steady, self-assured confidence, entirely unaware that the quiet sanctuary she had built to protect her family was about to face its ultimate test. The ambient chatter of the restaurant didn't just fade, it evaporated. The heavy oak doors swung open to reveal Kim Woo-bin, a man whose presence commanded immediate, terrified silence. He was in his late 20s, possessing a lean, powerful build that was accentuated by an impeccably tailored navy blue three-piece suit, complete with a dark tie and pocket square. His thick black hair, styled with volume at a sharp side sweep, framed a face defined by high cheekbones and a cutting jawline. He moved with the cold, calculated grace of an executive who owned the very ground he walked upon. Flanking him were three associates, each dressed in formal, dark business suits that suggested high-status corporate power, though their eyes betrayed a far more sinister purpose. As they moved through the room, they fell into a tight, fearful formation, their bodies angled toward him with a reverence that skirted the line between respect and absolute dread. These were not men who needed orders. They moved in anticipation of his desires, their expressions a mixture of cold assessment and underlying concern. When Woo Bin claimed his table, the restaurant seemed to hold its collective breath. He didn't just walk into a space, he conquered it, and for the staff, the presence of these men was a high-voltage warning, a signal that the night had taken a dangerous, unpredictable turn. What nobody in this elite dining room realized was that Millicent Brooks was operating under a ghost profile. The crisp white button-up and black necktie were a shield, hiding a mind that had once been destined for the highest echelons of global power. Just 3 years ago, Millicent had been a rising star as a high-level international security analyst, specializing in East Asian geopolitical strategy. She didn't just understand foreign policy, she understood people, possessing a rare brilliance that allowed her to speak 5 languages with flawless native precision. She could dissect complex political shifts as easily as she now memorized dinner orders. But a devastating intelligence leak, a security breach she hadn't caused but was forced to take the fall for, her career was instantly shattered. Scapegoated by powerful superiors and blacklisted from government work, her dreams were instantly traded for survival. With her family's financial future on the line, she buried her elite training, tucked her intellect away, and took a job where she was expected to be seen and not heard. She hid her hyperfluency, knowing that in a world of fragile, powerful men, a waitress who understood too much was a liability. She kept her head down, completely blending into the background, never imagining that the secret linguistic weapon she had buried would soon become the only thing standing between her and total destruction. Kim Woo-bin leaned back in his chair, adjusting the dark pocket square of his navy suit as his cold eyes scanned the room, eventually locking on to Millicent. To a man who measured his life by absolute submission, her upright, dignified posture wasn't just unexpected, it was an unspoken challenge. He took in her smooth complexion, her curly hair pulled neatly into a bun, and the simple waitress uniform, instantly reducing her entire existence to a stereotype. He saw an easy target, someone whose livelihood depended on pleasing men like him. A slow, predatory smirk crept across his face as he tapped his fingers on the table. Tonight, the business deals could wait. He decided this young black woman would be his evening's entertainment. When Millicent approached the table, her expression calm and composed, Woo-bin didn't bother to return her greeting. Instead, he initiated a subtle power game, deliberately making her wait while he whispered a dismissive comment to his lieutenants in English. They snickered on cue, their corporate facades shifting into a collective sneer as they watched their boss prepare to assert his dominance. Woo-bin looked up at her, his gaze calculating and heavy with arrogance. He was a predator playing with his food, entirely convinced that this waitress was worlds beneath him, completely oblivious to the fact that his cruel amusement was about to walk him straight into a trap. Woo-bin's smirk widened as he prepared to spring his trap. He leaned forward, holding Millicent's calm gaze, and seamlessly dropped his English facade. When he spoke, it wasn't the standard polite Korean taught to foreigners. His voice rasped with a rapid, heavy regional dialect laced with deep underworld criminal slang, a linguistic weapon designed to be utterly incomprehensible to anyone outside his syndicate. He openly mocked her, letting his words drip with a venomous, arrogant insult about her appearance and her place in the restaurant, assuming she could only stand there in blank, humiliated confusion. His 3 lieutenants exchanged knowing, cruel smirks, leaning back in their chairs as they watched the spectacle unfold. To them, the young black waitress was completely defenseless, a prop in his boss's calculated display of dominance. Woo-bin finished his order with a sharp, dismissive bark, a gratuitous insult meant to thoroughly put her in her place, while his men barely contained their laughter. He crossed his arms, fully expecting her to stammer, apologize, or desperately signal for another server who spoke the language. The trap had been sprung with absolute precision, and the syndicate sat back to enjoy her public defeat, entirely unaware that the heavy silence settling over the table was not the quiet of submission, but the calm before a devastating storm. The air at the table turned to ice, and for 3 agonizing seconds, time slowed to an absolute crawl. The ambient clinking of silverware and the low murmur of wealthy diners faded into a distant, muffled hum. Millicent stood perfectly still, her crisp uniform sharp against the dim lighting, her exceptional posture never wavering for a single fraction of a second. Beneath her calm, composed expression, a fierce psychological battle was raging. She calculated the cost of this moment with the rapid precision of the elite analyst she used to be. If she swallowed his venomous insult and pretended to be the ignorant target he assumed she would protect her job, her paycheck, and the fragile financial sanctuary she had built for her family. But if she let this arrogant criminal erase her dignity for his twisted amusement, a vital piece of her soul would break. She thought about the unfair framing that had stolen her career, the years of hiding her brilliant mind, and the quiet fury of always being forced into invisibility. The syndicate looked up at her, their faces heavy with cruel anticipation, waiting for the first sign of tears or panicked stuttering. But Millicent didn't break. Instead, she chose to stop hiding. A sharp, knowing smile subtly played at the corners of her lips as she locked her eyes directly onto Wu Bin's, completely shattering cultural protocol and drawing a line in the sand. When Millicent spoke, the response didn't just break the silence, it detonated like a controlled explosion. Dropping her server's persona completely, she answered in immaculate, hyper-fluent Korean. Her voice was smooth, matching Wu Bin's rapid regional dialect note for note, but it was the words she chose that cut the air like a razor. She didn't just correct his culinary orders, she seamlessly laced her sentences with deep, highly specific underworld terminology, criminal slang used exclusively by the upper echelons of the syndicates to discuss illicit shipments and hidden operations. With absolute composure, she casually let him know that her understanding extended far past the menu, dropping a subtle, lethal hint that she was fully aware of the illegal network he had spent years building. The shift in the room was instantaneous and terrifying. The three lieutenants froze mid-smirk, their bodies locking up in absolute shock as they stared at the young black woman who had just dismantled their boss's authority in his own tongue. Kim Woo Bin's arrogant smile vanished. His eyes widened, his eyebrows raised, and his mouth fell slightly open as the color drained completely from his face. His polished executive presence evaporated, replaced by a pale look of pure, unadulterated panic. For a single magnificent moment, Millicent stood upright with flawless posture, holding his terrified gaze and letting him choke on his own medicine, proving that the most dangerous weapon in the room wasn't his syndicate, but her mind. The veneer of Kim Woo Bin's civilization was entirely slipping away, revealing a raw, primitive panic beneath. His heart hammered against his tailored navy vest as his mind raced through a dozen paranoid scenarios. He looked up at Millicent, convinced that her flawless command of his syndicate's criminal slang meant she wasn't a waitress at all, but a deep-cover operative, an FBI plant or a South Korean intelligence asset sent to bring down his empire. His lieutenants shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze, their absolute submission shattered by the public display of weakness. Sensing the escalating danger, Millicent offered a cool, professional nod, stepped backward with her signature grace, and quietly exited the dining room, leaving the syndicate choking on their own fear. As she walked down the dimly lit back hallway, her hands began to tremble with the delayed adrenaline of her defiance. She had protected her dignity, but she knew men like Woo Bin did not tolerate being exposed, and her job and family's safety was now in jeopardy. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows of a corner table. He was an elderly man in his 70s with silver hair and a commanding military posture. Closing the distance, he looked at her with an understated smile. "An exceptional performance, Miss Brooks," he said in low, cultured tones. He handed her a simple business card embossed in gold. "I am a retired intelligence official. Your country made a mistake discarding you, but a new door is opening. Call me tomorrow." 3 months later, the ultimate reversal was complete. Kim Woo Bin was escorted down a sterile, windowless hallway by 2 federal agents, his confident executive stride reduced to an anxious, defensive march. The heavy steel doors clicked shut behind him as he was led into an austere government interrogation room, the cold fluorescent lights bouncing harshly off a polished metal table. He took a seat, his hands tightly gripping his knees to hide his trembling, before looking up to face his interrogator. His breath caught completely in his throat. Seated directly across from him, flanked by serious officials, was Millicent Brooks, Gone was the crisp white service uniform and apron. Instead, she wore an impeccably tailored dark business suit, a gleaming official diplomatic credential draped around her neck, and an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. Resting beneath her hands was a thick manila folder packed with shipping manifests, bank transfers, and wiretap transcripts, the complete, ironclad evidence of his entire illicit empire. Millicent opened the file, fixed her gaze directly onto his wide, terrified eyes, and offered a calm, knowing smile. In that single devastating second, Wu Bin suffered a total psychological defeat, realizing too late that the anonymous waitress he had tried to humiliate was now the absolute master of his fate.